first one, I'm going to show you quite a sketchy little exercise. I've got a picture of a little doe here. I do hares quite a lot as well, but I thought I'd try something different. And I'm working on some mount board. It's something I quite like with charcoal and pastels. It's not got a kind of grippy surface, so it won't hold layers and layers of pastel. But it's good for working quite lightly with charcoal. It's very easy to blend on. So it's nice for quite quick work, so that's what I like it for really. So I'm just going to sketch this little chap in. I always like using some sort of a tone background, especially with charcoal and pastels. I just find that the pastels go on a lot better when you've got a tone. I don't like working on white paper. Some people do. And if I'm just using charcoal, then sometimes I'll work on white. But I could really prefer a sort of tone, something like this I find particularly good for animals. I do quite a few sort of pet commissions, and in those cases I tend to pick a colour which suits the animal I'm working on. So often this sort of grey colour, you can see the one I've got on the go at the moment. She's a Bedlington cross Pastel. So she's got this lovely sort of fluffy grey fur, and it suited that tone quite nicely. And if I have a sort of chestnut horse or something, I might pick quite an orangey brown colour. But I find it suits me to pick a colour that helps my picture really. So I know there's quite a few of you that's shown some interest in various types of animals and things. So what sort of things do people like doing?
Cows.
Cows? Oh, right. I had a big cow picture, I've just put it up somewhere. So. They do make good subjects, don't they? Especially quite big.
Yeah. What's your background? I'm sorry I haven't had time to read your website, so
That's
I
all
don't
right.
know why.
I won't tell you much. Well, I've always been very interested in animals. I was very interested in animal sort of behaviour from quite a young age, and I was lucky enough where I grew up we backed onto farmland, and we had some horses at the time, so they were in the fields just behind our house. I spent a long time with horses without really thinking about it, but kind of absorbing what they were up to and how they looked. So they were definitely my first love when it came to drawing, and when I was younger I used to cover everything in little sketches of horses. Really more sketching and very quick work. It was quite a while before I did more detailed work, and as I got older I got into sort of commissions more, because I knew a lot of people, especially with horses and dogs and things, that wanted them done. And then I went and studied horses for 4 years at college, really intending to do some work with horses or with animals. And I got very interested in behaviour and training in general, and studied that with horses and dogs particularly. But I've kind of come back to my art. Been a little while coming, but I've come back to it, and I do more and more commissions, but I've gotten into teaching in the last couple of years, and that's something I love doing, so I run my own group now. So one thing that can catch people out quite a bit with animals is their eyes, and their eyes are quite an important part. She's making a poor job of hers at the moment. And especially when I find a commission, the eyes really are that individual animal. If you don't get the eyes right, the whole thing just doesn't hold together. But even with non-commissions, even with just a wild animal, it's got to be the right eye for that animal. And a lot of that is just about observation. But some people, we have a tendency to think of animals as along human lines. So a lot of people will draw an animal and automatically give it a very human eye, without actually stopping to think what that animal's eye looks like. Had a good example of a cow with very human eyes, and it's a little bit creepy. So particularly different types of animals. So, for example, deer and horses and sheep, goats, prey animals that get eaten. their eyes often have a very horizontal pupil, and I'm presuming that helps them see with their wide range of vision, see lots of little things sneaking up on them. So their pupil tends to be this sort of long shape, horizontal like that. Cats, as we probably know, they often have an upright slitted pupil when it's small. It opens out to a circle, but when it's small it's very upright, and we notice that quite well with cats because their eyes are often quite bright, and lots of us have a pet cat. Dogs have a round pupil like people do, so do hares, I think. But it's important to have a good look, so if you're looking at an animal subject, do your research, either looking at the animal in person if you can, or getting some good reference pictures, and see what exactly you're trying to produce before you just wade in. Put that there, I think you can see that. I'm going to make a mess of the rest of my picture, but still. Now I use quite cheap pastels mostly. These are Inscribe, which is a relatively cheap make to get. I do like more expensive pastels, and they work really well with more expensive paper. But I started out a bit poorer with my cheap pastels and cheap. But you can quickly get a good effect. Just getting some colour on. Now a lot of people stay at that stage with an eye, just sort of one flat colour, because eyes, if you look at people's eyes, they're often much darker at the edge, and the light catches them in a certain place, and that changes the colour of the actual iris as well as having the light in them. So they're quite simple ways of bringing them to life. Put a paler colour on. See, even with that, there's very little in that, but just the difference in colour helps the eye start to liven. Just that this is quite a useful thing, so I thought I'll show you. So animals' eyes, very often they've got quite a strong outline around them, quite a strong black, I don't know what you call it really. They don't have, the whites of their eye aren't quite so obvious as ours. I think they've often got a colour. They still have a bit of white of the eye that shows when they're particularly alarmed or particularly frightened. But whereas our white's always on display around the iris, a lot of animals' eyes kind of only show their iris. So there's often not much white in them at all to be seen. So this is something a bit like a hare's eye. So I am making a bit of a scribble of this just to show you quickly, but something a lot of people get caught out by. Most animals are outdoors unless they're pets or in some sort of strange environment, so the light in their eyes is nearly always the sky and the sun. So they'll often the top half of their eye is quite light because the horizon sort of comes in about halfway, and then you get the sky reflected in the top half. So often the whole of the top half is slightly paler. Oops. A bit muddy, and then you might get a particular catch light if the sun's actually out or something. Bit of a scribble. But what a lot of people forget is that as the light comes through the top of the eye, it shines out through the colour of the iris opposite where it comes in. So if the light comes in there, this part of the iris is always a little bit paler. And sometimes that's just a paler colour. I'm just adding a bit of white. It sort of lights the eye up a little bit. So it's a very scrappy way of showing you, but it's something to think a little bit of the lighter areas on. Some people will tell you with charcoal and pastels that you shouldn't use your fingers, and they're right, because you've got natural oils and things in your skin, so you will be marking the surface to some degree. I find this mount board fairly tough. It can cope with a bit of stuff and come out with hands that haven't seen a tap for 6 days. But personally, I just can't keep my hands off it, I'm afraid. So, plus you can't forget your blending tools when they're attached to your arms, which is very useful. We were talking about eyes before. Of course, the shape of the actual eye itself, including the pupil, is quite different. But the positioning of the eyes is one of the main things with animals. Again, with Animals that taste nice, unfortunately, their eyes are very much on the side of the head, keeping a lookout for the things sneaking up on them, and it gives them that almost all-round vision. Things like things that hunt and want very sharp vision in front of them, like cats and dogs, their eyes, and humans, their eyes are much more on the front of their faces. So if you look at birds, you can normally tell what sort of thing it might eat. Hawks and owls have their eyes on the front of the face, where they've got really good sharp binocular vision. Things like geese, which taste nice, with their eyes right on the side of the head. Right, sit down here again. So do any of you go out sketching animals in the wild?
You clever people do.
Have a habit of running away.
Yeah, I find super glue helps with that actually. Yeah. Yeah, there's a definite skill in being able to catch something quick enough. I don't mean actually physically to catch it, that's not right. But to be able to sketch quick enough. And sometimes that's just practice, I guess, because a lot of people are happier with a drawing and they want a reference picture next to them because they perhaps take longer over drawing or getting accurate drawing. But I do find sketching is a really good way of improving your eye, especially very quick sketches. It kind of to the point where it seems ridiculous, where you give yourself 5 seconds. Be surprised what effects you can get, because you start with this scribble and you think, could be anything, could be an ostrich. But over time you can train yourself to get the basic shape much more quickly. That's something that intrigues me as well about animals, is that a lot of them have quite a distinct basic shape that you wouldn't think of. For example, especially at a distance, a lot of chickens just look like little triangles. But people sometimes try and paint miniature chickens in the pictures, and there's too much detail. It's easy to put too much in because you know what a chicken looks like close to, so you put this little miniature chicken right in the distance, and then your eye sort of doesn't make sense because you know you should be able to see it that clearly, and yet it's perfect in every way, but 3 miles away. And the same with cows. From a distance, they're very, very rectangular cows, very sharp shape, especially at the bum where the tail comes off. It's a complete right angle. But you don't think that. People would think, well, surely they're more rounded, and you get sort of cows with little rounded bottoms, which look far more like horses. So have a look at things like that, photos and reference pictures, especially of distant animals, because it's a good way of getting that shape right. Because at a distance, you're not trying to paint miniature animals, you're trying to paint the suggestion of them, and it's a completely different thing from trying to paint in a miniature.